Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for The Last Duel. So what The Last Duel is essentially about is we do center on the character of John de Carouge. He is this very well-respected knight of sorts, and basically one day he is venturing off to Paris. He's gone on a bit of a trip, and when he does come back, his wife, Margaret, basically tells him that while he was away, unfortunately, she was raped, and not only was she raped, but it was by Jean Carouge's seemingly best friend of Jacques Degree. And so when he finds this out, he basically decides to take matters into his own hands, and he is going to make sure that justice is served on his end, and requests for a duel to the death to essentially determine, to essentially determine the validity of what Margaret is saying, but also make sure that that justice is served. And we follow all three of their perspectives in uncovering the deeper truth behind the story. So The Last Duel overall, I was very excited for this film. Ridley Scott, yeah, he's been kind of a hit or miss director lately. More misses than hits, honestly, but I think that he's a director that still very much does have it in him, and it very much seemed like this could be his comeback year. Between this and House of Gucci, it really did seem like he was trying to get back into more serious storytelling, become a legitimate Oscar contender, and The Last Duel seemed like the kind of movie that could really do that. I think Scott's always done a great job with these very big, sort of epic tales, and I think something like this, was something that I was very interested in checking out, and I have to say, it very much delivered me. The Last Duel is a very different movie, I think, than many people are going to be expecting, but it is so much better because of it. This is a very dense, this is a very emotional drama that honestly is way more relevant and topical than you really think it would be in a lot of aspects. It's definitely a really great film I think a lot of people are already very much overlooking, but we're just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And I mean, that's really one of the big selling points I think going into this movie. This film has a all-star cast behind it, and I think virtually everyone really does deliver in the way that we want them to. Let's first talk about Matt Damon, because I think that overall, he's a very well-liked actor. He is, takes on a role like this, and he gives the role all of the qualities that you really do want. This is, he makes his character feel very heroic, but also kind of gives him a bit of stoicism behind it, and I think he does a really great job with that, but he also makes you really root for this character and really gets you on his side. So when eventually that mask is revealed and we see, more of the truer side behind him, it's that much more effective, and I think Damon did a really great job with this performance. There's so many different facets of this character that ends up being explored, and I really loved what he ended up doing here. I think he gave a really strong performance here overall. But I mean, Adam Driver, man, look, I feel like I talk about this in every movie that this guy is in, but he is truly just such a masterclass of an actor. Just the performance that he gives here is truly incredible. Jacques Degree is such a vile and selfish human being, and Driver really does play him with this sincerity that I think works very well for the character. You really do get the sense of who this guy is, why he would commit the act that he does, and why he doesn't really feel that he's in the wrong for it. As disgusting as it is, I think Driver really leans into that quite well. And again, I've said it before, he really is best playing these kind of egotistical assholes, and he really does kill it here. This is a peak Driver performance. I really loved what he ended up doing throughout this film. I think both of these actors work very well together. They're back and forth, they're not on screen as much as you'd expect, but I think overall they worked very well together. But it has to be said, as good as those two are, this film would be absolutely nothing without the truly standout and masterful work that Jodie Comer does give here as the character of Margaret, who, what a hell of a year that she's having. Between this and Free Guy, she really is putting herself on the map. She really is showing just how great, how dynamic of an actress that she can be. And the fact that you have, two really strong actors, and Comer, I think, really is the big standout here, says a lot about how talented she is in this movie. The character of Margaret is one that is extremely vulnerable. Her voice is not really one that is very much recognized. In many points, she's kind of ignored or neglected, and you really do see how that's built up, throughout the years, and how this is really like her one chance to let her voice be heard. And, you really do feel for Margaret in that scenario. This is just such a heartbreaking performance to watch. And I think Homer just does such an amazing job here. She expresses emotions, but not in a showy way. Obviously, because of the time period, she kind of has to repress some of them, but you feel every single second of what this character is. You feel the pain, you feel the anguish, and just in general, I loved every bit of this performance. I think this is very much an Oscar-worthy performance here. I would love to see her get nominated at the Oscars. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but if there's any performance that I think is Oscar caliber, it's very much this one, because I really loved what she ended up doing in this film. I think she really is like the heart and soul of this entire movie, and I think she just did an amazing job. And then Ben Affleck is really good here too. He gives a more comedic performance than I think you would expect him to, but I think overall he gives a strong performance here. Really, this entire cast, I mean, that's one of the reasons you come to this film, and they very much do not disappoint. But now I want to get to the directing and the writing, because that's what I think really makes this film something special. Ridley Scott's directing here, it's much different than you're expecting. Like, yeah, this is a medieval film, but don't even think about comparing this to Gladiator, because it is so different in so many ways. This is much more of a straight up drama than like this like epic sort of action film. There are some epic set pieces, which we'll get into, but the majority of this film is a drama, and he does a really good job, I think, of leaning heavy into that. But you also do see, his style that he has for this movie. He really is trying to, I think, take what is a medieval story and apply it with modern sensibilities, and it works very well here, because there's so many people who go into films that are based on true story, and they're like, oh, well, that happened so long ago, it wouldn't happen now. And Scott recognizes that. Like, he's trying to kind of deconstruct certain tropes that you normally do see, and I'll get more into that with the screenplay, but I think he just did such an amazing job here. The film really does get a lot darker as it goes on, and I think it definitely does earn it. Like, the film starts in sort of this optimistic way, and I think as, the rug is pulled out from under you, it starts to get a lot darker as it goes on, and I think that can be very hard to pull off as a director when you're juggling so many different tones here, but he really does do it all with ease, and I was very impressed by what he did. It's also a very, restrained film, especially in terms of the violence and the mayhem. You don't see it until the end, and once it does, I mean, he really does let loose, and I think Scott really does show. He very much does have it in him. This still is a very talented director. You just need him to have the right project, and I think this very much was the right project for sure. So I really did like his directing, but getting into his writing here, I think that's what makes this film so unique in that way, because yeah, we've seen films like this before where a woman accuses someone of rape, and we kind of see the effect that this has on her and everyone around her, but what makes this film so special is the way that this film is divided. The whole movie is divided into 3 different perspectives, and this really gives everyone a chance to really present this story in a different way. There's 3 different writers with this film, and I'm to assume that each chapter of this movie was written by a different screenwriter. You have Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, and Nicole Holofcener, and I think all of them do a really great job here, because what I really loved about this film is by getting into each of these perspectives, we have a good idea of who these characters are, but more so how they see themselves as in this scenario. And that's something I always love about stories like this, where you see different characters' perspectives, where you can go back and see different, situations play out. I think they do a pretty strong job with that. In this movie, but I mean, there were many moments here that did throw me for a loop, especially when it comes to the character of Jean de Carouge. I mean, from the beginning of the movie, you do like him. You find him to be this guy that's very noble, he's very likable, he seems to generally really love his wife, he seems to really want to help her, and, you really do see him as this heroic guy. But then, as the movie goes on, you start to realize, oh, no, actually, this guy's kind of a scumbag, and that's kind of how he wants to be viewed. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at this, because it really does show just how highly these men think about themselves, and that's a big part of this movie, I think, is the machismo factor of it all. What this is doing to their reputation, them needing to them needing to protect their manhood. That's kind of what Carouge is doing in this movie. He sees himself as this great guy. He sees himself as like the hero of Margaret's story. He wants to be the one to get everything done. He wants to be the one to make that final say. And you really do see how his ego really does affect him. And I thought the film did a really strong job with that. And then when we cut to, say, Jacques Degree, they really do a strong job of getting us to see how this guy doesn't see himself as this terrible person. He doesn't see himself as, this really sort of selfish asshole that's eventually going to do something irredeemable. I think that that's something they leaned into very well when it came to this character. The whole movie has like a different tone to it. It's a lot more silly in that way, and I think that was definitely the right way to go about it. So that's something that I really did enjoy. I thought that chapter was very well constructed in that way, but it really is the third chapter of this movie. That's, I think, when everything does fully come together, because once you get to chapter 3, this is when you really start to realize what's actually at stake here. What is this film actually about? And what I think it's really about is you have this character, Margaret, who's been through something so traumatic in her life, but this really is a culmination of many different things that have happened. She is someone that is lacking so much agency within her life, obviously because of the time period. She doesn't have the freedoms that she wants. She's not as outspoken as she wants to be, but you can see that that's kind of been nagging at her, throughout her entire life, and this is like her chance to like finally, let her voice be heard and do something about it. And the way that's basically overshadowed by her husband, who he wants to take all the credit, he wants to be the one to fix everything. You really do feel for Margaret. And I found that there was actually a lot of deeply relevant themes here. There's so many instances where you will still hear today of like a woman talk about, something traumatic that happened to her getting, whether it's a sexual assault, whether it's something like that. And the guy in question, he's the one that's like taking all the credit for it. He's the one that wants to help her out. He's like the savior in that sense. And I think this film presents that very well. You definitely get the sense that, obviously, yeah, there's still women that aren't believed. There's still women that aren't taken seriously during these times. But the types of things that Margaret is told in this movie are absolutely appalling. When she appeals to the court and she's trying to explain to them, the severity of this situation and how this happened, the responses that they give her, it's just baffling to me that anyone would ever think that this was okay. But I think this film presents it in a very interesting, this film presents in a very realistic manner. And while obviously things are different now, the response that she gets by the court, that's not the response she would get now. I can definitely see what Holofcener is trying to do here. She's trying to show that, like, sure, it might be different, but a scenario like this could kind of play out in this way, where you have the guy and him wanting to step up and him taking all the credit and all the men making this decision for her. She doesn't want this to be, a duel. She wants this to just be a regular trial. She doesn't want anyone to have to die, but because these guys are, so caught up in like their masculinity, they are dead set on making this happen. They don't really care how it happens. They just care that it does. And I think that the screenplay overall, it's very well presented in that way. And like I said, I really do love the way that this film will cut back to certain events from the previous chapter, and we look at it in a whole new light. It's very well handled in that way. You get a sense of who all these characters are by the end of it, and it really does tell a whole new story, and I really did love that a lot. The dialogue here, I think, also is really well done. I was very invested throughout the entire time. I think that overall, it had that realistic dialogue. Obviously, yeah, this can be a historical drama, so there's a lot of words they're using that you probably won't understand, but I thought that overall the screenplay was very good here. I really enjoyed the writing to this movie. I thought that it was much more nuanced than obviously you're expecting it to be nuanced because of the way that it's done, but it tells a much more, I think, daring and important story than many, and that's something I really did like about this film. The other thing I think this film honestly does a really strong job with is really subverting tropes of normal medieval dramas. Look at ones like from period pieces from like the early days. They're really cheesy, they're really over the top, but they also portray these men as like these noble, amazing guys. They have no flaws to them. They're the hero to their women and things like that. And the women, meanwhile, are kind of just like window dressing. They're there when they are there when they're needed to welcome their husbands back. They're there to sort of like be that sort of shoulder to cry on when they need it, but they don't really have much agency in the story. And The Last Duel starts off that way, but as the film goes on, especially when we get into Margaret's perspective, we do get to see things from her side, and it reveals a very damning truth, a very sad truth that really does make you feel for her character. You realize just how unrecognized she is, how unseen she is, how nobody really takes her seriously, and how, while other women are sort of content with just, being the wife, or being being the wife, being the breeder, that's really all they do in their husbands' lives, just cook and clean and tend to the house and, help them bear a child when they eventually need to. Margaret wants more. Margaret dreams of a little bit more agency in her life, and I think that's what makes you really latch onto her character, is that this is not only a woman that's been through something very traumatic, is that this is a woman who for a while has wanted a lot more. She's wanted to, get a little bit more agency. She's wanted her voice to be heard, and it's not, and you really do see, what that does to her. You really do see the effect that has on her overall, and I thought that was something that they did a great job of, especially I think in the wake of the Me Too movement and things like that. Like, this film really does a strong job of latching you onto this character, kind of making you wish that like other medieval dramas would flesh out the women more, would give us more of the woman's perspective, because by the end of the film, it really is the most interesting one, and I think that's what many people are going to take away from this movie overall. The cinematography, though, is truly exquisite to this movie. I mean, the look and feel of everything, you forget that this is a set. You really do feel like you are just plucked into the medieval France. I think they really did they really did film that very well here. The whole thing looks very tangible and things like that. Costume designs are all really well done, and I think overall the film has really stunning cinematography throughout. But the one thing I haven't talked about is the duel itself. The duel itself in this movie does not happen until the last 20 to 30 minutes, and that's something that might annoy some people because they really do want to get to it, but trust me when I say it is very much worth the wait. It is every bit as bloody and brutal and just absolutely insane as you really are expecting it to be, and it really does show just the knack that Ridley Scott has for directing something, but also Dariusz Wolski's cinematography is just so strong here. They do not pull any punches when it comes to that final duel, and I was very impressed by the way all of that turned out. So I really loved everything going on with the cinematography here. It's every bit as crisp and authentic as it really needs to be, and I really loved everything going on there. But the score as well by Harry Gregson Williams I think is also very strong to this film. It starts off very minimalistic, but it gets a lot more epic as it goes on, and I enjoyed his score to this film quite a bit. I think it provided that emotional sort of connection that we really did need. And the editing, like I said, this film is divided into 3 halves, and I will say it can be a bit overlong at some points, particularly chapter 1, Matt Damon's, I think was a little too long. It took me a little bit to fully get invested into this movie, to fully get me invested into what was going on, but I understood that they really want this story to breathe. They want to take their time. They want us to get to know these characters, so when the situation does arise, we really do feel connected to it, and I think that's something they did a strong job with. I think there's, a lot of editing here that's really well done, the way they do let these scenes play out. I will say there is a scene, it's obviously the assault scene, the way it plays out, we see it twice in this movie, and that might be a little bit too much for some people, but I understood why we need to see it twice. I understood why they wanted to show the entire thing, even if I do think they probably could have cut it off at some point. I understand why they decided to go about it that way, so I don't really have an issue with that. I think my only other real issue with this movie, besides besides the fact that I do think the film can be a bit overlong, is Ben Affleck's character. Now, I enjoyed him in the movie. I think that his back and forth with Adam Driver was really well handled. You know, you get the sense of this guy, he doesn't really care about this case. He just really wants to protect his friend in that way. Even if he knows that he might be in the wrong, he doesn't really seem to care much. But I felt that his character overall, he just felt a little bit more like a plot device than a character to me. He's really just here to like plant seeds of doubt. He's here to motivate Driver's character to like really run with this story that he's innocent and whatnot. And I just wanted a little bit more from him. I felt that honestly, we could have used a fourth perspective. I would have liked to see more of his character. I would have liked to see more of what drives him, what makes him, what gets him to make these choices. Because as it goes, he really does just feel like a side character to me, and I think they really could have done a little bit more. And like I said, Affleck's great for what he has in the movie. You know, similar to a lot of these characters, he plays very different facets of this character throughout the film. Every time we see him, you know, in each different perspective, he's portrayed in a different manner, and I think that's something that Affleck did a great job with, but I wanted to see a bit more of his character, because at the end of the day, it was just a little bit unclear to me, like, who is this guy? Why is he going about this? And I think they could have done a better job with that. I think my only other flaw with this movie is the relation between Jean de Carouge and Jacques Legray. You do get it, definitely, but I think that overall, I wanted to see a little bit more interaction from these two to really, like, showcase the betrayal that this has on Carouge, the effect that this has on him, you know, why he is so adamant to duel with this guy who was his best friend, you know, and things like that. I think they could have dived a bit deeper into that, but I understood why they didn't. I understood they wanted to kind of keep us at an arm's length and kind of just like wait for the details to unravel, but I think they could have had a little bit more interactions with these two just to fully get us invested in their relationship, but I think overall they did just enough there. But other than that, I mean, there's very little I can complain about when it comes to this film. This film is very brutal. It's very hard to watch at points, but it tells this very important story about a woman and her getting this justice and it not really going in the way that she wants it to. It draws a lot of real life parallels, especially with the situation at hand. It's got 3 powerhouse performances from Matt Damon, Adam Driver, and especially from Jodie Comer, who should be a shoo-in to at least be nominated, I think, for an Oscar. Like I said, it can be a very hard watch at times, and I can understand if it might be a little bit too much for people, but I think the story that's telling here, it's one that's deeply relevant. I think it's one that has the right amount of emotional resonance that it's really gonna get a lot of people to fully latch onto, and overall, I think this was a very effective drama. It very much does show that Ridley Scott does still have it in him when he's able to really go all out and like make a compelling story here. I hope that this is a sign of a comeback. I hope that he's able to continue to make films like this because he really does excel when he does so. It sucks that this movie is not getting the recognition that it really does deserve. It didn't perform well box office wise or anything like that, but I do hope that more people do check out this film as the year goes on, because I really do think it is something special that I very much do recommend. The Last Duel really was a very effective drama, and I am going to give it an A-. But overall, guys, in my review of The Last Duel, let me know if you guys saw this morale, lift your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.